killer sperm, blue and humpback. These are some of the whales of Galway Bay. Come see these beautiful, intelligent creatures hire Pigoggy Webster for all of their academic projects. That thing they do with the tail, that's them dancing in happiness at another successful project by Pigoggy Webster. You're not going to need a bigger budget. You're going to need PigoggyWebster.com.
For coming in late, the presenters are requesting that people sit down near the front if you don't mind. This is going to be a participatory session.
But you're not late. You're right on time.
But you are not late.
I love the way Catherine's shameful.
Sit. All my nice is gone.
Yeah, I bet I. Dave is actually just going to come in on video because he's in a meeting. So he has made us a video, which is part of the presentation. You're Regina! It's so nice to meet you. Hello! Likewise. I'm so glad you're here. It's funny that it took us coming all the way to Ireland.
Please come down and sit near the front if you don't mind. This is a participatory session.
Are we live?
I got the itch.
Martin, are we doing video as well? Which one are you going to video? The screen? We just wondered. Wow.
He's a talented man. Don't you oppress him.
Preference.
What I'm thinking is I'll start off with the handheld and this. Do you prefer the handheld? Because we can pass this back and forth.
Yeah, sure. Well, I don't need the thing, do I?
Clicker? I'll just...
Because I've got one slide.
No, you've got a couple. Because you're doing the middle part on how people get their math stuff.
So I do the bit where we start with my piece.
Yeah.
And I would do the next one, which is innovation.
Okay, I
No,
I'm
yeah,
doing
that
it.
other bit. Yeah, no, I do the other bit.
Yeah, but you're doing that bit after they put their stuff in the board.
That's right.
Yeah, so I'll hand you off, at least, I can keep the clicker, but I'll hand you off the mic.
Yes.
I'm thinking we
What
should,
mic?
when we're not, we're having a mic. We can stand over there when we're not speaking, if we want to. Just so we're not trying to get across these chairs, which will be awkward.
That would be fun.
Yeah. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, not what? We're gonna confuse everybody and do this.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I think we might get started. It's a great honor and pleasure to introduce the next speakers, who are leading lights and amazing thinkers in the area of open education, open pedagogies, digital literacies, et cetera, et cetera. So 2 out of the 3 speakers are here in the room, Laurie Phipps and Bonnie Stewart. Dave Cormier is another speaker, and he's going to be joining by video that he recorded because he can't join synchronously. So for everyone who's in the room, please come down near the front because the session is, as it says in the title, it's participatory. And for everyone who's online, I know there'll be ways for you to participate as well. So welcome, everyone, and thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Please do come down if you're comfortable. If you're fine where you are, that's great. We do have some exciting stickers for the people who come down. But I wanted to let you know, this session is really essentially a planning session, and we had envisioned it in a little classroom with movable tables. So we're going to try to do a participatory group discussion, framing some ideas, and hopefully nobody will break a leg or anything else. But I'm sure there are doctors in the house, hopefully of the medical kind, if needed.
So now we can't say that nobody got hurt.
That's right. And the conversation that we want to invite you to today is part of a conversation that I have been doing a couple of talks over the last week in a variety of locations around the idea of the pro-social web and the participatory web. And part of it really comes from an idea of what in this room can we build on to make things different than they are. And that's why we want your participation and your ideas. Because, oh, now this is not working. It was working.
That's not working either.
Okay. Can you help us, Martin? Sorry. Yay, Martin.
Okay.
There. And basically, this is our invitation to conversation. So, we need to talk about the web. Some of you may remember that back in the day, we had delightful cat videos, and that it was not just about monitoring the real-time collapse of late-stage capitalism. Web 2.0. How many people in the room are familiar with the concept of Web 2.0? Right? And my assumption was that this would probably be a crowd that was broadly familiar with that concept. It was the idea that rather than the internet just being an online space where you could get to Encyclopedia Britannica, rather you could create Wikipedia, contribute, and essentially a read-write web where the users are also contributors to the things that are then used by other people. And so I had the privilege of being part of this web back in about its peak era of 2006. How many of you in the room same? Okay, great. What I'd like to ask you to do now, how many of you have sticky notes and markers available to you? Who needs us to bring you sticky notes and markers? Please raise your hand if you need sticky notes and markers. Excellent. My lovely assistant, Lori, will be pleased to throw things at you. Markers, please don't throw things at people. It's not inclusive. They may not have the desire to catch in public. What I'm going to ask you to do is on sticky notes, please write down 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 separate sticky notes, practices, or things that you do where you leave a trace on the web, where you leave a footprint for other people to see. Just something that is part of what you do to contribute to the web. When you have your 1 or 2 or 3 sticky notes with your practices on them, I'm going to invite you to come down and to place those on this board. And I'd like you to consider whether those practices feel like they are in a social activity realm, a learning activity realm, a professional activity realm, directly in the middle of the intersection of the Venn diagram of all 3, or somewhere between. Jim. That is up to you and how you choose to frame this for yourself. And once you've come down, so 1 or 2 or 3 sticky notes with things where you contribute to the web, where you are part of the participatory web still, and then please bring those down, and then
The people that put Post-its on the board get a sticker.
In fact, you can actually all have a sticker, but that's just me. Yeah, no. So Regina, lead the way. Come on down. And please do take a EdTech Unicorn Says, open does not equal inclusion sticker.
Cosplay does not equal consent. Come on, you're free. Still free.
Here, I'm going to hand this one. I am going to be photographing this board. You may not want to see your name on those.
Everybody's doing it.
Great. I haven't mentioned this yet. Once you're done, I'll go in.
That's right. Oh, my friends.
Here is the part where you need to. So when you're ready, hand them.
Yeah, I'm ready as soon as we've got these. Yeah. If you are watching online, then please put your practices up by using the tag.
No judgment. Right in the middle, right? Please don't put your sticky notes directly on top of other sticky notes. Lori, can I
Of course.
Just as we're watching this go up, it's really interesting to see what's emerging, because a lot of people have Facebook and Twitter, particularly under the social piece, but then there are other places where Twitter is solely over at the professional level or under the learning level. If I were to put it there for myself, Twitter has ended up actually being the place where I have done a great deal of learning over the past 10 years or so, because I spent a lot of the last 10 years living in a very small, remote, fairly monocultural place. And what Twitter did was really, really open my world, not just professionally, but to people who have very different lived experiences from me. So in terms of my learning, it's been huge.
So comments coming in online too. So people are saying online that it's very difficult to actually break down where things appear, whether it's social or learning. Although they're trying to online, which is nice.
And my hope was in setting it up so that there was a triangle rather than 3 lists of social, professional, and learning, that there was some room for intersection and that idea that there is bleeding between the 2, or 3.
We've got 2 mics now, we can wrap.
Oh, perfect. I think I was thinking of that as learning. Like not formalized learning necessarily. That's a good point.
Okay, last few going up. Yeah. You've got the clicker.
I love that. All right.
So the nice thing about doing this kind of exercise with these kinds of people is that if we did this with 100 people at any other conference, we'd probably get 20 post-its. There's an inverse relationship with this audience, I think. This one's you.
Well, the question that we just wanted to frame really here was, okay, so everybody is doing lots of stuff in this room. That's great. Is everything okay with the web? And if you had to pick an answer, who says yes? It's great. Oh, thank you, Dave White. A lot of us, I think at this point, might say no.
So we want to know where people have pulled back from. Where are people not online now? Thinking about where you've actually put the post-it notes, where you put them, whether it was social, whether it was professional, whether it was learning. What are the spaces that you've pulled back from in the last few years?
And social, maybe, yeah, just shout things out. For myself, like, I'm still on Twitter a lot by some standards, but I'm on Twitter much less than I was because the space has shifted. And you were saying Facebook has shifted for you.
So it's where is which social? Is it all social?
Facebook.
Okay. Why? Sorry?
People of adverts and people taking my data and doing evil things with it. It's no longer authentic.
So for me, it's different. So, well, we might want to look at what a definition of authentic is. But maybe that's for later as well. But
Are bots authentic?
true. So for me, I've pulled back from Facebook because I'm fed up with arguing about my family who support Brexit. Okay? So that's not about the bots, although they're obviously influenced by the bots. But that's why I don't do Facebook very much, because I just get angry. Sorry, yeah.
There are two reasons why I stopped going on Facebook as much. One was Donald Trump.
So the reasons that we've just been given is the first one was Donald Trump.
Who I'm not a fan of. And I didn't want to lose relationships with people who liked him. And then also, I had a child and didn't want people having access to photos of her. And also, I'm happy with my family, but when I look at other photos of other families, I compare myself to them. And that just made me feeling down. And so I pulled back.
So we're all pulling back from the web in some ways. You've probably all seen this image, right? So this bottom one we've just heard about. So those sort of things. So Twitter for me isn't about wrath. Facebook's about wrath, but it depends on who you are. But we're all pulling back from certain spaces, right?
Yeah, and there are other trajectories developing as well, where increasingly we're seeing the web, like Jim said, as a space of surveillance, as a space of automation. This is from China, but it is about the class care system, which involves facial recognition software being used in learning spaces. There are also developments happening in my own country around research into this area and how can we tell if a student is engaged in learning. And when you consider that facial recognition software does not see, for instance, black faces as well as it sees white faces, we are setting up systems with deeply, deeply baked-in inequities on top of the already baked-in inequities that exist in our institutions of higher ed, right? So with surveillance and all of these automated pieces, we have some problems. In my own classes, I'm increasingly, I recognize that I'm teaching students who may have already been red-pilled on 4chan and may come in with an idea that the men's rights movement or white supremacy is some kind of actual freedom from the great groupthink of, this semi-enlightenment world that education is trying to bring forward in its crawling way. And how do I deal with that? We're also seeing, and again, the extreme version happens to have developed in China. How many of you are familiar with the idea of the social credit system there? Right, so it's a totalizing system based on closed cameras and big data and social media accounts that essentially, for folks, there's a Black Mirror episode that's almost identical, but basically if you are not a good enough citizen, if you buy too much liquor at the liquor store, or if you do X or Y, you might have your capacity to buy a train ticket revoked. Worse, if your friends and colleagues and peers are such that they are not considered good people within the system, that affects your essential credit ranking, right? And so these begin to be seriously problematic impacts of the web.
So one of the things, a few months ago, for those people who are based in the UK, we had a United Nations report about the UK and poverty in the UK, a global north country, and they were saying that 1 in 4 children actually grow up in poverty in the UK. And I got really angry about it, and so I started going, well, I need to read more about the report, and I thought this was going to be about structural things at government level. And when I started looking at it, it was actually about digital. And it really shocked me. And the reason it was about digital is because the government have decided to go down a route of open government and actually opening things up and putting everything online. And instead of it being digital as well, it became digital by default. And so the poorest people in the UK, in society, were the ones that had the least access to devices, the least access to the internet. And this is why we did the stickers that we put out today when you came down. It's because as far as the UK government are concerned, open is not the same as inclusion. As much as the people open it up and as much as we put things online and we say this is okay, the UK government are actually at the same time as putting things online, also putting things in place that structurally take things away from the most vulnerable in our society. So they moved things online and then said you can't access them. And then as well as that, what they also did is start putting things in place for example, disabled people. And they actually have an algorithm so that even when you do get to speak to a human about the welfare benefits that you need as a disabled person, there is a set of algorithms that the human goes through and says, if this, then that, if this, then that. So as well as actually having it online, even when you got to see a human, the process of using algorithms, the process of using this technocentric approach disenfranchised people, even though it was a very transparent and open system.
And basically, those of us, particularly in higher ed and in the open community, have often been at the forefront of digitization in the systems in which we live, in which we work, and we have tended to sometimes, and not all of you may be implicated in this but see moving towards digital as potentially positive. And I think it's important to really kind of put a couple of brakes on and go, all right, what is actually happening with this stone that started rolling? And one of the things that we're seeing is increasingly, particularly in higher ed, the ways that digital or the word innovative end up coding at senior admin strata is really just with this, it's truly kind of a code word. If you can say that something is innovative and you mean that it's digital, it is often a fairly totalizing technocratic system that runs either on the logics of business or on the logics of the attention economy and media, or some combination of the other, without necessarily the ethic of care or the logic of care that Kate had spoken about this morning underlying it. And this came from George Siemens as well, also with his permission, but same day as that other conversation was happening, he was framing the rise of the term learning engineer and learning engineering for what we used to call the work of higher ed. And as Juliana, my colleague in Spain, had pointed out, it's her response that I actually thought was particularly important. Let's use semiotics here. Engineering means white, technocratic, industrial, and post-industrial male power, right? Let's take the meaning embedded in the term to exclude peripheral education, not a social process anymore. And so, this is Dave with his mouth open. Dave is my partner, and he and I, for the last little while, have been beginning to try to start this conversation about, look, what do we do about the web? How do we bring back some of the things that may have gotten many of us into the web? And so I'll let him do his own bit.
Hi folks, it's Dave Cormier here. I'm calling you from sunny Windsor, Ontario today because I couldn't make it to OEL 19. And I want to talk a little bit about the pro-social web. So the pro-social web is a response to the challenges that we see out there on the internet, the ways in which it can be damaging, and the trolls, and the attitude, and the cesspool that we so often see in our social media spaces, and frankly across the web. There's two responses possible to this, and I think what we're seeing in a lot of the ways we're dealing with the web and children, for instance, is we're saying, let's stay away from it as much as possible, or worse, let's limit access to certain amounts of time or spaces. Those solutions are not going to change the fact that people are going to go to the internet. The internet is too valuable a tool, it's too powerful a tool, and social connection and participation is way too powerful for us to ignore. The other option is the one that we're proposing, which is that we need to all actively move towards a more pro-social web, both in our own interactions and our own advocacy, and really in the choices that we make. So I know a lot of very rational, very smart people who are leaving some of the social media spaces that we work in. And I understand their reasonings. They can be very damaging places. They can be places where we're attacked. And I understand that as a white heterosexual male, I'm in a very privileged position in terms of the ways in which I get treated in those spaces. Still, in every way that we can, the work and the interaction, the participation we do on the internet basically creates the internet. I mean, we all know the internet is created as we go along. There are a lot of powerful institutions who are trying to affect the way we work. A lot of it has to do with money, some of it has to do with governance and power, but turning away from those spaces is not going to make them better. We're leaving them behind for other people to deal with, and we make them worse, I think, every time a reasonable person leaves a good internet space or leaves a bad internet space. That space gets a little worse behind it. And I'm not advocating for all spaces all the time. What I'm saying is we need to find a way to bring our values to the internet. And it's not just our participation is better, but also the quality of our participation. So every time we go to make an assumption about an entire group, like lawyers or politicians, the ways in which we make those groupings, the things we say about those people now, given the digital, it actually reaches those people. And those people can be harmed or offended or triggered or whatever that happens to be. Also, your perspective about how to talk about those people don't get left at 2 o'clock in the morning at a pub somewhere. They're there permanently as another framing of the antisocial way in which we interact with each other on the web. Every time you act in a pro-social way, you create a positive threat. Every time you act against it, you create a negative threat. Every time you step in front of somebody else who's doing it, you're creating a new positive threat. And that's really the call. 1 person, 10 people, 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people aren't going to do this. What it needs to be is a constant part of our practice, particularly our practice, of thinking about things like open as inherently pro-social, not just open for open, but pro-social. How are we making the world better? How are we helping it represent our values? I hope you guys have a great conference. We'll see you again.
And Martin, I'm going to need you to turn that. Sorry, I wish I'd used my own laptop. Sorry. So basically, I don't think, and we don't think, that this idea is going to fix the web. However, in the sense that many in this community are committed to being in this web space and have all of these practices that tend to foreground not just leaving traces, but building connections often with other human beings. What we'd like to think about are how do we do open in ways that make the web better, right? How can we build on some of the things that people in this room already do, either at the individual or at the system level, to make things decent? What are some small things that you can do where you are that are building positive connection or positive modeling for your peers, your colleagues, perhaps for students, perhaps for your senior admin? A lot of what's happened in digital is that most of the people who are decision makers related to digital in government and in higher ed and in lots of strata right now are not folks who had any experience of the participatory web. Those of us who have, I think, have perhaps some responsibility to think about what that means and perhaps how we can build that. So what I'm going to ask you to do very quickly is sort of a think, pair, share. I'm going to ask you to take a second, maybe 1 minute. Try to think of at least one thing that you do or could do within your life, your work, the systems you're in, that is open, that is helping to build pro-social connection, and for whom does that have an impact? Feel free to jot it on a sticky note or just for your own self, and then I'd like to ask you to turn to the person next to you, all right? And share that and talk a little bit about how this might work. What can we do based on the infrastructure that we are familiar with to change some of what's happened with the digital?
Or tag us online.
Yeah, and if you want to hashtag this, ProSocialWeb, feel free. Those of you who are virtually attending, please feel free. I'll grab my phone so I can read feedback.
1 minute, go.
Kind of figured out an alternative.
Capture those. Or if somebody wants to post, we've got time to do it. Let's have a share. I'll run.
You don't look like you want to be called on.
Okay.
Well, perhaps it's the wrong question. I'd love to capture that.
Okay, Bon.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Does anybody want to share anything that they've got in their conversation?
Let's start with this side. Who's got something on this side they want to share about a practice that's open? Excellent.
Could you say where you're from as well?
Bonnie already knows about this because we talked about this. I'm Julia Hangsler. I'm from Vancouver Island University, and I started off the side of my desk something called the Center for Education and Cyber Humanity at VIU. And the mission is seeing education as a vehicle to promote society's pro-social knowledge, skills, attitudes, perceptions, experience, and self-efficacy with technology.
Thank you. Anybody over here? Anyone?
I've got the best side.
Regina's being voluntold. Yeah, I mean, it's up to you. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we had discussions back around larger chunks of content. So it was nice when we used to have discussions around blog posts and things like that. Whereas I feel like that, all of those kind of detailed or in-depth discussions online have got diffused into social media. So if I write a blog post, people will chat about it for about 10 seconds in Twitter. It's not about me, but it felt more participatory and more thoughtful when people were using when people weren't putting all of that effort into a platform that then just kind of diffused it away.
Yep, we got a response over here.
Yeah, my PhD research is very much around the connectivity, particularly in OER platforms. And that what's really coming back to me from my data is that it's digital fatigue. People just have that quick fix. They say, I can like it, but it tells us nothing.
Yep.
and we have lost that comment, that connection that we had, and we need to get that back. And I think there is some synergy between thinking about the digital fluencies, but also thinking about, okay, how are we creating these interfaces? How do we make that connection prominent? How do we get that so people don't feel so fatigued all the time?
And also, I mean, when back in kind of the heyday of blogging, you were much more likely to have skin in the game or real estate in the game, a blog yourself, right? That your comments were driving someone back to your blog to create an actual network of people. Now, Facebook and Twitter have both made those networks very easy. Anybody else have any ideas just about things that they do or can do before we close up? Martin and one right here. Okay, yeah, you go ahead and I'll walk up here and get these two folks.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm from Royal Roads University, Vancouver Island, Canada. One of the things that we work to institutionally, and I was just sharing with Michelle, it's tricky. So instead of doing an honorarium for guest speakers, we have a standard $50 Amazon gift card that can get sent out. We try to give it an option to donate to Creative Commons, so they can choose to donate to Creative Commons or receive the Amazon gift card instead. So we're trying.
Mine's really small and simple. On all of the platforms that I'm involved in, I just try to boost other people whose voices are small and I think need to be heard.
Being aware, right, is a huge thing. Let's one last comment, one last hand up here.
I feel like I'm on a game show.
Come on down.
So something I try and do, I was reflecting on it, is to try and open up the context of what people are thinking about, because a lot of the open movement is reacting against systems of control and that were there, but we're just one species on a tiny little planet, and if we may as well work together, we may as well be open, and so it should be the default position. So I kind of fight for larger context and get people out of the little wells that they're in and think bigger, and then a lot of the conflict goes away. It becomes more obvious that things should be open.
So one of the things about the structure, especially in institutions, is really important. As I'm filling now as Bonnie comes down. But that's really important. So in my organization, we run a course for leaders in higher education. And I think that if we ask the question, probably less than half of them were even aware of what open is. Yeah. So these are senior managers in institutions, and probably less than half are actually even aware of the open movement.
Yeah. Which is why I loved Kate's closing to the keynote today, which is we do need it is incumbent on us in this room to make people aware of the things we are doing, and also to be ourselves aware of the things we are doing and consider how we can do them in ways that build a web that we would like to be a part of. Thank you for the ideas. If you have sticky notes from the second part of the conversation on the way out, if you want to put them on the wall over that chair, I'd love to capture them. Please don't leave without a sticker. Open does not inherently equal inclusion. You got to think broadly. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
I won't introduce you until you get your... Well, I really just want a wee... Let's see if I can get this. Exit. Just want a Google.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Just be safely tethered at the moment. That's fine, that's what we need. Right.
Thanks, everyone. Well, the next speaker is getting set up, and I know some of you might want to move to another session, so we'll let that happen. Our next speaker is Marion Kelt, who's a librarian and a learning technologist from Glasgow Caledonian University, and she's developed something called UK Online Copyright Advisor. And again, this is going to be a participatory session. So she's inviting you to road test this and give her some feedback. So welcome, Marion.
Hello, everybody. Run now while you have the chance. I feel very, very inadequate. I don't even have any cats playing the piano pictures. I have, though, got a picture I made earlier, which I was going to put up on the wall, because I was picturing small, intimate room where we all just sat about and had a nice chat, and it's all gone a bit sideways. So here is my poster.
It's awesome.
Here's one I drew earlier, right? So we'll pretend, now class, let's pretend this is sticking up on the wall. Hold that up for you? Oh, your arms are going to get tired. Oh, yeah, what are we going to do without Martin? I think I'll just carry him about with me in the future. I feel a wee bit like a pub rock band who suddenly got dumped in the O2 arena and they said, right, you know, do your best with that hen. So I have actually, in the very first time I have ever talked to people without PowerPoint slides. I mean, we're talking live and without a safety net here. But I've written notes. There they are, look, just to prove that I've written notes. So we were talking earlier about optimism being a discipline and doing something social, pro-social, like that, sounds good. So I've actually done a pro-social thing, and I want you to try it out. And in the spirit of feedback, I want you to tell me what you think of it. Now, one of my many jobs, because I have lots, is to be the university copyright advisor. And let's face it, everybody hates copyright, including me. So this is a sort of thing about you don't run away quick enough and you get a job. So what I would like is for you people to try it out. Now, I've got librarians to give me feedback, but their feedback tends to be, oh, great, you've done something so we don't have to, and it's all weird technical voodoo, and, you know. So I thought, well, you guys probably know a lot more about the ins and outs of technology. So I have brought homework for you. See, everybody else gives you stickers and sticky pads, but oh no, this horrible Scottish woman gives you homework. So I would like, so this is like school. Take one and pass it on. Okay. So we'll start at that end. And I think I might just have enough handouts for you all. So what we're going to do, again, back to the live and without a safety net, is we are going to get the copyright advisor up online, and you're all going to have a shot of it. Now, if you don't have your handy-dandy device with you, it should work on your phone. And if it doesn't, I can lend you my machine. Just don't break it, because I've got to take it back. Now, you can see on your little sheets, there is the address, but you can just Google it and just do GCU copyright advisor, and it should, there you go, couldn't have planned it better. Up it comes, right at the top there. You can just go in. Now this is completely open because we're big on the open. And the idea is that we have built this thing and we are sharing it under Creative Commons for you to download and do what you will with it. So if you are not lucky enough to live in Scotland, never mind, you can download the files and you can edit them in Markdown, which is quite easy to use because I used it, so it must be easy. And you can change it to suit your own institution, your own country, your own version of copyright laws. Just do what you want with it. So, it's the wrong version. Oh, horrors. That shouldn't have happened. Okay, we will not panic, we will not panic. We'll just add in some more keywords, because we're librarians and that's what we do. Okay, I knew I should have run away and hid in the toilets. Right, have you all got your addresses? Because it's got the right address on the worksheet. Right, if you could pass them on.
We're quite enough. Okay. Share. I'll share.
Here we go. There we go. This is the new and improved Copyright Advisor. If you Google CARP, not crap, and put Copyright Advisor, it should come up and just link you straight in. the idea of this is the new version, which we got a grant to upgrade. It's now on HTML5, so it should work on a variety of different devices. And we'd like you to just have a wee shot. So pick a type of resource. Why I thought you may, I know it's a long stretch, but you may be interested in it, is that a lot of learning technologists do get harassed with copyright questions from lecturers because they think you guys know everything about everything. Like librarians, you just know everything. So they're like, okay, I want to do this, and I want to put all these images in, and I want to put all these videos, and I just got them off the internet, so it's all right because the internet's magic, and I want to put it all into my resource. And you sort of say, and what about copyright? And they all say, what's that? What are you talking about? So this has all of our knowledge about copyright all put into it. So the other thing that we found with the old one, the content's pretty much the same, but the old one had a lot of problems navigating about. And if you went backwards, it broke, and it was very aggravating. So this one, you can jump about. So say, I'll just give you a wee for instance. Say I want to do a lovely PowerPoint for my lecture, and I want to share it on the VLE, or the LMS, I think some people call it. So we go in here, and it asks you questions. So it's like, right, did you create that lovely image? And you go, no, not me, wasn't me, I didn't draw that copyright thing there. Where did you get it? Most people just randomly surf about and grab images. So say, okay, got it off the internet, there we go. And then we say, well, what way do you want to share it? Do you want open access? Do you want closed access? And then, of course, we have to explain what we mean by that, because all of our lecturers just basically don't know what it means. So we put in, okay, it's on Blackboard or whatever. And we go. And there's your answer. So the other thing that we tried to do is not put too many words in. Now, I don't know if I'm doing a disservice to all of our academics, because they hate too many words. And they especially hate too many words about copyright. So we cut it down, we put links to outside resources, because it can jump out, and we put in a glossary, because sometimes they don't know what all the words mean. Well, I'm cruel to them. So what you can do at this point is say, well, actually, that's not quite what I'm planning to do. So you can start again from the beginning. So you think, no, it wasn't an image at all, it was a video of a cat playing the piano. So, where'd it go? Here it is. We can go in there, and then you get the same sort of framework, because this was really hard work, was actually developing the framework so that we could then put it online. So it all kind of works the same way. And another thing I would like, if you have any bright ideas, is other things that we could add into this. We were thinking we might, if we're feeling very brave, do questionnaires, because one of the questions we get asked a lot from students and researchers is, well, I got this questionnaire and I want to use it for my PhD. And you're like, where did you get it? And you go through. It's like Groundhog Day. Copyright is just one big, horrible, awful Groundhog Day. Welcome to my life. So you can see we just go back down our questions, but they vary, the questions, depending what resource you're talking about. So if you got it from Bob, if you want to stick it on the VLE, there's your answer. If you think, oh no, I clicked the wrong button because I was going so fast, you can just jump back up. Go in there and say, well, actually, I filmed it on my phone earlier. So it allows you to navigate through. So my plan was originally, I say, right, at this point, I would sit back and have a wee rest while you guys did all the work and tried it out, and also you people at home out in the wider world, give me your feedback. Now, you can feedback on Twitter, do whatever, whatever you've got. I'd really like to hear what you think and how you would think of maybe using it. So that's MugPunter7 on Twitter, so you can tweet to me and let me know. The other thing I thought we could do was, if any of you have any questions as we're going, just shout them out and I'll try my best to answer them. Oh, just go away and stop making us do this homework. I should say that the second version was created with a Slick innovation grant. Thank you, Slick, for paying for. We have a lovely company who actually built the web platform for us, and they said, right, there's your framework, go to it, fill it in with the content. So I put the words in, and they built the framework for us.
Thanks very much. I have a question. I'm just wondering if you've had people that have remixed it or adapted it, particularly outside the UK, for other jurisdictions with different copyright law.
Not yet. I'm hoping, well, I thought this would be actually a very good opportunity because we're from all over the place. You know, some of the laws are very similar, some are different. We're actually planning to jump sectors. I've got a group of NHS librarians who are interested in doing one for the NHS. Because I had thought, oh, the exceptions are pretty much the same, and they went, no, they're not. The licenses aren't the same. It just needs a wee tweak. So they're away working out some words, and then we'll put together a version there. There's another possibility that people in the archives sector might use it. Questions aren't quite the same, but there are a lot of issues there around maybe exhibitions and that sort of thing. So we're sort of thinking we've got the decision tree software, and we can use it, just whatever words people want to plug into it, and it's quite easy to move about the questions and whatever, and put your own logo in, whatever. The other thing we were thinking of using it for is actually in the day-to-day work of the library, and maybe using it for a decision tree for electronic resource problems, because we're big on having folk wandering about the library, pouncing on innocent library users and saying, have you got a problem? And whenever they have a problem, it's always e-journals aren't working or databases are down. So we thought, well, actually we could use that same methodology and get them to go through. And so the person who's standing with the irate or distressed student can then go through and say, okay, well, it's not going to work because you've put in your NHS password or you've done this or whatever. So we thought that might be useful. We haven't done it yet, but we're still at the thinking stage. This is very much just escaped out of its box at the moment, so it's all shiny and new. So I'm hoping you guys will all have bright ideas for me. Gone quiet. Oh, Chris.
One thing thanks very much, Marianne. And as we're both fellow copyright geeks, and one of the things that us copyright geeks do love to talk about is all the complexity about copyright. And what this does is clearly try to strip out that complexity by funneling people down to the core piece of advice that they need. But I think it's about that balance, isn't it? Because I think sometimes what my question would be, have you had any feedback about whether using this approach loses some of that broader context? Because you're kind of delivering now a very specific piece of advice. And actually what I find when I'm talking to people as a human being about copyright is picking up on those different contextual things about making decisions, particularly around risk.
Yeah, people have kind of used it as a basic starting point. And because I thought, oh, this is great, this is going to save me half my work, and they'll go away happy. But it didn't work like that. Quite often they've used it as a starting point, and then they've come to me and said, aye, well, that's all very well, but what about X or Y or Z? Like the other week, I had one that was quite complicated, and it had to do with the fundamental advice in the advisor was right, but then they had other issues around, like wider licensing issues, and what trumped what? Did copyright law trump the license and that sort of thing? And you can't really put that, the difficult bit in creating that was crunching the knowledge down to fit the format. And then there are bits in that just says, well, it's too complicated, get in touch with us and here's the email address, because you just have to in some cases. So we have had to do that. And the other thing is, what you could do is just not do it at all and just have a big screen that says, it's complicated, let's talk, there, never mind. And that would sum it up.
Okay, yeah, because there's been talk about having our kind of service desk system where people put in queries and that we can encode some of this information in there. Obviously, from my perspective, I think, well, that does me out of a job if you end up encoding all of that in there. But I think it's just trying to get that
It's
balance,
too
isn't
woolly,
it?
you know, because it's legal and we're waiting for case law to catch up. Oh, lady up there in the green, and man there in white shirt as well.
I'm wondering about accessibility, and in particular for like the journal article or a PDF.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see any information on the website.
I've been thinking about that because, and one of my other hats is that I'm developing a workflow for the library to help provide accessible copies for visually impaired or otherwise users. And I was just, I'm still at the stage thinking, yeah, that would be quite a good one if we could figure it out. So I'll need to, what I do is I work very closely with our university disability team, because it's not enough to say, well, we can do this and that. You know, there's things like, well, what format do you need and what type of PDF and all that sort of thing. So that could be son of copyright advisor coming over the hill. But yeah, that's a really good point, and it's one that I have been thinking about.
I think one thing that could be very simple you could put on here is understanding the licensing of how you can manipulate a document in terms of accessibility.
That's true.
I've been
Because, I
working
mean,
with
a lot of times the user has the technology in their own hands. They just have to know that it's okay. And they can do it.
but also like if you use a technology such as Abby Fine Reader to prepare the PDF so that a screen reader could read it, it will identify blocks of text, but sometimes you reorder them or you have to type in text over it. So you are physically altering the document itself, and so that's a very confusing thing for me. Can I actually use this open education resource based on the license if I alter it for accessibility purposes?
That's true. That actually would be interesting to follow that one up. I can see more white hairs sprouting just as we speak there. The thing with this is, once copyright's like that, once you start turning over the stones and looking under them, you find like a whole world of creepy crawlies of problems, and one sort of runs off and brings another one. The man there with the beard.
Hello. Yeah, it mentions when things have gone well and you get a green screen, it mentions this is fine for non-commercial educational use, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know what non-commercial educational use is. So, because to me, like, all of education is commercial.
We have been informed by the powers that be, as in the folk with suits that pay my wages. They've said, everything we do is non-commercial educational use. And I went, but what about, well, it's tricky, it's complicated, because I started thinking about, well, what about people in partner institutions where they're actually paying fees? But in Scotland, it's a kind of different based model. But they said, no, missus, don't go looking for trouble. We have defined it as, and this is what you are working to, it's non-commercial. So I went, right, that's fine, you just put that in an email and I'm good with that. So I'm just working to that definition. Now, I would say, ethically, that's probably a bit ropey, but I'm not even going to go there. You know, life's too short. Which is a rotten answer, sorry. I think everybody's on. Oh, Sheila's got one eye.
It's actually just more of a comment. I work with Marion at GCU, and actually I think something that's come through in the conference is that where do people start? Where do you find out about openness, and how can we extend the community? I think for me, just being able to use this, yes, it doesn't give me all the answers, but it's a good starting point. It's a non-threatening starting point, and I think it's the kind of thing that we need to, Kate was talking about, you know, being hidden in the open. Hello? You know, that we need more things like this to allow people to start having the conversation so that they can go to Marion and her colleagues and say, well, actually, it told me this. I have no idea what that means. Can you help? And yes, you can.
Yeah, because one of the things we thought, one of the other things that I'm kind of tasked with thinking about is getting people to do open educational resources and to share them and think about Creative Commons and ways that they can share. And one of the barriers is copyright, because people are like, oh, I'm scared, I've got this stuff that I've been using for years, but I don't know where I got the images, and I'm damned if I can remember. So I spend a lot of time saying, well, let's have a look and see if we can find where they were, and then like, okay, we can't find it, it no longer exists, but maybe we can find something similar that will do the same job. So I spend a lot of time preparing lists of good copyright-free or openly licensed resources that people can use. And then they went, oh, I never knew about that, and I never knew about that, and they're away and they're happy. But it's getting them over that wee hump to start them. And we're trying to build it in. When we get our new lecturers in, they have an induction programme, so we're trying to get them to talk about where they keep the resources, using EdShare to share them, using Creative Commons, not to be scared of copyright, all of these things. But the ones that have all been jumping about for 20 years, it's interesting. I have many interesting conversations with our more entrenched academics.
I was just interested to see if you'd noticed an increase in conversations around Creative Commons or licensing based on the resource. Because it sounds like it might be a route into broader conversations.
Well, because it is still really new and I've not given it a real big push yet, I wouldn't say since that's been out there, but since I've been engaging people and working with Sheila's department, and you know, it's no good sitting in the library, you end up just talking to yourself. So you have to get out there and you have to talk to like organisation development and various other people. And once they say, oh, that's the wee woman we talked to about licensing or copyright or whatever, then it starts to roll from there. It's like what I always used to call the hairdresser effect. So if somebody finds a good hairdresser and they tell all their pals, and then suddenly you can't get an appointment with your hairdresser because everybody's using them. Academics are no different from anybody else, and they respect word of mouth more than anything. You know, if an edict comes from on high and says, you will all do this, oh no, we bloody won't, because they're Scots and that's how we are. But if you say, well, here's this thing and it'll save you loads of work, they go, oh well, okay, I'll get a shot. You know, it's how you come at a thing, but there's no quick and easy way to do it. But we are getting analytics on it, so every now and then I go in and I have a wee look.
Okay, I think that's about the end of our time for this session. Marion, thank you so much. A round of applause for Marion, please. And can I